Welcome to the Inner Healer podcast. I'm your host, Sacha Stewart. Your inner world creates your outer world, and we're here to talk about how you can transform from the inside out. I'm a kinesiologist, mind-body medicine practitioner, healer, conscious business mentor, and teacher. I work with everything from the scientific to the energetic, the spiritual, and the metaphysical to empower, inspire, and uplift you and give you the knowledge of your own inner healing gifts. I'm so honored to have you here. Let's begin. Hello, beautiful people. I'm so excited to be here with you for episode 1 of The Inner Healer. This podcast has been a long time coming, and it feels really transformative, even just for myself to be here. Finally beginning to explore a new medium where I can share not only more of my own story, but the stories of others who have healed and created big changes and transformation in their lives, as well as including lots of tools and processes along the way for you to begin to create shifts within yourself. And in this first episode, I wanted to talk about mind-body medicine and why this work is so important, as well as how I came about beginning to make my own transformation and why I'm really so passionate about what I do. And one of the reasons I called this podcast The Inner Healer is because healing begins from within. When you want to create change on the outside, you actually need to begin on the inside. I also want you to know that healing physically, emotionally, mentally, energetically, it's possible. I'm actually a living, breathing example of that, which I'm going to go into a little bit later. But before I even dive into that, I want you to know that you are whole, just as you are. I think when we begin some of this work, we have a tendency to judge ourselves, make ourselves wrong or deficient in some way. My true belief is that we're all on our own paths to heal and change our stories and patterns, many of them inherited or that we bring into this lifetime. Perhaps they came from your childhood or events that happened in your life, and that is really a part of your soul's journey. And this is a path to growth and also freedom in many ways. And this is a constant part of your soul's evolution on the planet. We have things come up for ourselves to heal and shift in this human experience so that we can expand and to create what we want in our lives. I always like to describe it a little bit like the layers of an onion. You peel back a layer and reveal the next story or pattern to be healed. Something else rises to the surface, whether it be another belief or perhaps it's the same narrative coming up with another layer. It doesn't mean you haven't already shifted a great deal. In fact, it can actually arise to show you how much you've grown and how you can handle the situation this time round. Or what choices do you make differently? And this is what leads you forward. And even though there's always challenges arising for all of us, you can still create a very happy, resilient, and abundant life for yourself. I know for myself that even now, after 13 years really since my own real deeper inner healing journey began, that I've always having new shifts to make. However, it doesn't prevent me from living fully in life now. Because like everyone, I have my ups and downs. I have old patterns pop up that need to be healed, that need to be shifted. But I'm much more able to cope with them and to tend to them and to move through them more easily. So no matter where you are on your own life path or healing journey, know that it is possible. You have an innate capacity to heal on all levels, body, mind, and energetically. They're all intimately connected and they affect each other. And I think sometimes we put the power of our own healing outside of ourselves or put other people in the category of healer. Yet we're all powerful healers. It's actually a gift that you're born with innately. And you can seek the help of talented practitioners. And in fact, you should. We all need support. I have my own little personal team, my go-to people, as well as obviously being a practitioner myself. However, it has to start within you, and I really want to give you back that power of your own capacity to heal, and also the belief and trust that you can. Essentially, as humans, we all have a natural desire to be in homeostasis, which is a state of balance. And there's hundreds of processes operating below the level of your conscious mind in order to be able to do this. If you think about your breath as one of these, you don't think about your breath at all hours of the day, yet your body keeps breathing. It's automatic. Your body, your mind, your energy systems, they're like a little self-regulating universe. They're continually working to establish harmony within you, to activate you, to calm you, and also to establish a cycle of repair and rejuvenation. And balance is really the key. All systems, whether physical or energetic, move toward balance to create a sense of internal stability, both within and also the external energies and situations that you're coming into contact with on a daily basis. And so these systems are constantly adapting at all times. And in our modern world, it's very easy for this balance to become unstabilized, as I'm sure we're all aware of. And when you're chronically out of balance, particularly on an emotional, mental, or energetic level, your physical body doesn't work so well either. There's a great saying that I have always loved, which is get the mind right and the body will follow. And this has been a really huge part of my own story as well. And I haven't shared a huge amount about my own story before. I've probably sprinkled it in here and there. So it almost feels a little daunting to begin to lay it out here. But I actually think it's important to do so you understand why I do the work that I do, as well as the experiences I have had to come to where I am today. And I've actually always had an interest in the mind-body connection. I started studying nutrition actually back in my 20s, but it wasn't until November in 2009 I actually woke up with pain throughout my entire body, and I had no idea what was going on. The sheet actually hurt me to be under it. I couldn't walk downstairs or even sit on a chair without significant physical discomfort. And this was my warning sign, yet I chose to ignore it. My body was trying to tell me something, but I wasn't listening. I wanted life to continue on the same, despite actually how unhappy I was deep down. I went from a seemingly well person to a very unwell one overnight. I was so far off track with where I should be going in my life, yet I had what I thought I wanted. I had a high-flying job as a commercial film producer in advertising. I was going out with the guy I always wanted to be with, yet I was constantly anxious. I was very stressed, and neither were making me happy, and both were a constant source of overwhelm. And this was really wearing me down, particularly my nervous system. However, these two things in particular had become such a part of my identity that I really clung onto them for dear life, not really willing to look at what was going on underneath. And then I actually had a really big shock. A person I knew, she was a friend of a friend. She passed away in very traumatic circumstances. And when I heard that news, it really kicked my already weak adrenals out so completely that within a few days my body began to react, and that's when that pain arose physically. And it was really the beginning of one of the most critical parts of my life. And being an advocate even then of good nutrition and a healthy lifestyle, I really did have a deep belief then that food was medicine. I thought I could solve it myself, and I set about a program of doing all the things that would fix me. And at the time, I was diagnosed as having arthritis. It turns out that actually wasn't the case, yet I was very reluctant to go on medication. So I read everything out there that I could to address it naturally. I did everything for inflammation. I changed my diet considerably, but no amount of green juice was going to actually be enough because I wasn't actually addressing what was going on underneath the surface. I wasn't changing any of the things that were actually causing the mental anguish. And finally, things got so bad that I gave in. I took the medication. I'd stuck out at that point for around 6 months, and I really needed some relief from the pain. Yet I was in no way prepared for what came next. The medication actually made me worse. In fact, it actually paralyzed me. In the nights, I couldn't physically move. It was much worse at night. Somehow, though, I would manage to get myself up and go to work. But at the end of the day, I would just have to come and lie in bed, building up the will to do it all again the next day. The rheumatologist didn't believe me when I told him that the pain had become worse with the medication. He said it wasn't possible, which made me feel pretty scared and alone, I've got to say. And yet I still didn't listen. My body and the universe was giving me some very, very clear signals that I had to stop. Yet I kept soldiering on. I was due to fly to New Zealand on a film job, and crazily enough, I actually went. And I believed at that time that if I just held it together and did nothing after work, that I would get through it. That was pretty short-lived. My body had other ideas. I was in agony and I just couldn't ignore it anymore. And my body essentially went into shutdown mode, like full shutdown. I came home from Auckland in a wheelchair, which definitely wasn't what I had expected. But luckily, through a friend, I found an incredible integrative doctor, which, although more commonplace now, were very rare at the time. And he understood the whole mind-body connection. And while he treated me with Western medicine, he opened me up to a whole raft of other practitioners to begin to work on what was going on the inside. So rather than just treating the surface level symptoms, he was treating what was underneath. And having always been open to spirituality and the more Eastern side of medicine, I really jumped at this. So my Western diagnosis of symptoms were extreme adrenal fatigue. My hormones were pretty completely non-existent in my body. I had fibromyalgia, mercury toxicity, leaky gut, and I'm sure probably a few other things as well that I can't remember now. I have a pretty small build physically. I'm tallish, but my frame is small. Yet I looked double the size as everything was so swollen. I couldn't wear shoes as my feet wouldn't actually fit into them. All my joints were so incredibly swollen. I could barely walk. Just having the will to take a shower in a day could take half the day just to build up to doing that, just to get myself up and to do it. And the pain over that time had been so intense that even though I literally did nothing all day, I didn't even watch television or read, it was like my mind had switched off just to deal with the physical pain. And I was very reliant on a small number of friends who were incredibly kind and would drop off food and they'd check in on me. And in all honesty, I'm not actually sure how I managed through that time. It's all very foggy. But when I came out of that other side of that first initial period, it was like I'd really been living to a degree in some kind of alternate universe. And I was in that stage for about 2 to 3 months. And there were so many things that became a part of me getting better: nutrition, psychology, acupuncture, more esoteric spiritual healing, even getting the amalgam mercury fillings removed. These were all part of my recovery. So it took really that 2 to 3 months before I actually had the capacity to walk properly again. But 9 months until I could work again. And even then, I had to be incredibly careful. I could only handle pretty small jobs and fairly low stress. I certainly wasn't at a pace that I had been before. And it was really 2 years before I was actually functioning at complete normal capacity again. And then, even then, I'm not ever sure that I really got back to that capacity of what I'd been able to manage those years before. And even now, I still feel like I'm on a healing journey. But over these past 13 years, they have transformed. Everything's transformed so much. My life is completely different. Anyway, I just wanted to go back to 2010, which was about a year into that process. As with all things, if you don't listen to the signs of the universe and refuse to let go, they tend to get taken away for you. So the relationship ended, despite me still clinging on. And while I went back to work, my heart really wasn't in it anymore. Yet I had no idea at that point on how to change anything. So while you could look at this story that clearly everything wasn't working, something was. My body, and also what I believe to be my higher self, was shifting out of what wasn't meant for me anymore. It was moving me into where I should be going. And this didn't happen for me overnight. In fact, it took me till at least 2016 to really create the biggest shifts. However, this was definitely the beginning. And life is a journey, and what we often see as the worst events in our lives can often turn out to be the catalyst for something way better. And in fact, I'm incredibly grateful for the experience that I went through. I really wish I could go back to the woman back then and reassure her, to tell her that good things were coming, seeing her struggle and trying to figure it all out. And in fact, even while I'm talking, it makes me very emotional. And I wish I had the knowledge that I have now back then. And that's really why I'm doing this, because that knowledge is what I want to share with you. And that's why I do this work. Our minds are incredibly powerful, so is divine guidance if we're prepared to listen. And I had to figure it out for myself. As to you, to a degree, no one path is ever the same. Yet some of the tools and stories from others can help give you direction. There is so much more information available now and things that you can do. And I don't believe you have to hit rock bottom like I did to get clarity and make change. So while yes, I had physical illness, it was very much a mental, emotional, and spiritual crisis at its heart. So even as my body healed and my mental health improved, I still had a huge amount to work through. Yet this was a turning point and the moment where my life really began to shift, and I really began to springboard into knowing myself on a very deep level and to discover what was working in my life and what clearly wasn't. And it launched me into one of the best decisions of my life, which was to move to Copenhagen in Denmark in 2012. My dream had always been to live in Europe, and it turned out to be one of the greatest and happiest periods of my life so far, really. Meditation came into my world in a very strong way there through a Buddhist teacher at a centre in Copenhagen. He was Irish, he was humble and had a wonderful sense of humour. And he made me really truly understand meditation for the first time. So it had definitely been on my radar in the past. I didn't really know what I was doing or have the skills. And he taught me the value of having a good teacher, one whose positive traits I still look up to now in my own teaching. And I remember him saying to me, meditate for 10 minutes a day and it will change your life. And I listened and I did the practice. And it's probably one of the tools that has had the most profound impact on me and how I live my life today. And particularly as I was still working in the film industry at that point, it gave me resilience and it gave me tools to manage my stress and to create more balance. And while I was working in Denmark, for the first time in my life, I also put my personal life at the forefront and just simply lived for a while. I had a wonderful group of supportive friends, a beautiful community, an incredible lifestyle that nurtured me to make further changes. I began retraining, and even though I was still working in the film industry to pay the bills, I just took one step at the beginning and began a coaching course. I didn't really know where it would lead, but it was moving me in a new direction. Sometimes I think we believe new beginnings are something that start with a big bang and fanfare, yet often they begin in the void, in the darkness, where it feels like nothing is happening, and small shifts begin to percolate underneath the surface. And it may not seem that big and significant at the time, but it starts the ball rolling, and this was really my moment. Further study came to become a meditation teacher and a kinesiologist and mind-body medicine practitioner, and that still continues. I'm the eternal student. I hope to always remain one. But towards the end of 2016, I had moved back to Melbourne at this point, and it was really the time to draw the line in the sand, and I made really the biggest leap of my life to leave the film industry that I'd been in for 20 years and totally change direction. I realized I couldn't continue to do both with my true passion always being on the sidelines. I was also at a time where I actually had to look at some of my deepest patterns, as I was still self-sabotaging in a major way. I was doing all this great work on myself, meditating, eating well, exercising, yet I still had some old addiction patterns playing out, going out and having a big night on a weekend that had been such a huge part of the film industry I'd been working in for 20 years, but that really wasn't doing me any favors. And I wasn't enjoying it. It gave me anxiety, shame, and I also know that it was actually masking insecurity that was pretty deep-seated from when I was young. Feelings of not being good enough or worthy enough that I would attempt to mask, and yet it wasn't working. So I knew I couldn't continue to live my purpose and do the work I wanted to do if that behavior continued. So that was also a really big shift for me to work on those patterns that were really undermining my ability to create the life that I wanted. So again, that was another major turning point, making that commitment to myself so I could show up not only for myself but for my clients in a way that I felt proud and present and had integrity, and to show up for their well-being. So that was really a big point of progression in my life. I also had to work on my confidence to get over my fear of putting myself out there and to speak in front of others. In fact, my first year of teaching was quite honestly terrifying a lot of the time. It was truly fake it till you make it, where I just had to kind of white knuckle it through. How I looked calm on the outside, I will never know, but I wanted to teach badly enough to get through it. I'd come from an industry where I'd always been propping up other people and supporting my director's dreams and visions. So rather than being at the forefront and speaking my own ideas and thoughts, this was really a pretty big shift for me. I also put a lot of work into shifting my patterns with my own kinesiologist and getting to the bottom of what some of those old fears and stories were. And in fact, when I began studying mind body medicine, this was really a great forum for me to dig deeper and to really allow those old fears and those patterns to diminish over time. And I still can't almost believe it's been 6 years since I began those massive changes. But I finally feel like I'm in a place where I'm a lot more comfortable. Everything comes easier now, and life feels so much more peaceful. And I can't say it was an easy road making those changes, but I was also very determined and had the will to make life different. And I think sometimes people think when you find your purpose that suddenly it becomes smooth sailing. However, I think sometimes that's where the journey really starts to begin. And when I shifted into my passions, it was challenging on every level, really, personally, financially. It brought up a lot about my own identity. However, now I feel like I've really settled into this new version of who I am. I know a lot more about myself. There's much deeper self-awareness. I know what I can get through. And I also know that I can support that in other people as well. While life isn't perfect, I'm not about perfection at all. I think life would actually be very boring. And I know I've still a lot of areas of growth ahead of me. However, I can say I'm fulfilled on a very deep level. It's not about a career or a job anymore. Rather, it's really a life's work and a life's mission to share with others and help others live their dreams, and to help you heal your own patterns and for you to make your own impact on the planet. And there's really a momentum where I couldn't not do this work. I'm propelled forward every morning to live my own personal dream, and I know that I'm going to be doing this work until the end of my days to continue to share, to teach, to learn, to grow, and as much as I can to support others to do the same. So there you have it, at least quite a bit of it. I feel like I've said a lot, but also really hardly touched the sides at the same time. But I'm sure as this podcast grows and I get into more conversations, and my plan is to interview others as well about their own journeys, and I'm sure more of my own story will come to the surface through that as well. I'd love your feedback. I'd love to know what you'd like to learn, any questions that you have. Please do write me. I'd also greatly appreciate your support, leaving me a review, liking and subscribing, so it allows this little tiny seed of a podcast to grow in the future. So thank you so much for listening. I'm so grateful that you are here, and speak soon.